Yeah. Canto 1, Chapter 9, Text 18. This Sri Krishna is no other than the inconceivable original personality of Godhead. He is the first Narayana, the supreme enjoyer. But he is moving amongst the descendants of King Vrishni, just like one of us. And he is bewildering us with his self-created energy, Mayaya, Mohayan Mayaya. Purport. The Vedic system of acquiring knowledge is the deductive process. The Vedic knowledge is received perfectly by disciplic succession from authorities. Such knowledge is never dogmatic, as is ill-conceived by less intelligent persons. The mother is the authority to verify the identity of the father. She is the authority for such confidential knowledge. Therefore, authority is not dogmatic. In the Bhagavad Gita, this truth is confirmed in the 4th chapter, 4.2. And the perfect system of learning is to receive it from authority. The very same system is accepted universally as truth, but only the false arguer speaks against it. For example, modern spacecraft fly in the sky, and when scientists say that they travel to the other side of the moon, men believe these stories blindly because they have accepted the modern scientists as authorities. The authorities speak, and the people in general believe them. But in the case of Vedic truths, they have been taught not to believe. Even if they accept them, they give a different interpretation. Each and every man wants a direct perception of Vedic knowledge, but foolishly they deny it. This means that the misguided man can believe one authority, the scientists, but will reject the authority of the Vedas. The result is that people have degenerated. Paragraph. Here is an authority speaking about Sri Krishna as the original personality of Godhead and the first Narayana. Even such an impersonalist as Adi Shankara has said in the beginning of his commentation on Bhagavad Gita that Narayana, the personality of Godhead, is beyond the material creation. And it gives an asterisk with the statement from his commentary. Narayana Parovyaktat. Andham Avyakta Sambhavam. Adasyantaschit Tvime Loka Sapta Dvipacha Medini. The universe is one of the material creations, but Narayana is transcendental to such material paraphernalia. Paragraph. Bhismadeva is one of the 12 Mahajans who know the principles of transcendental knowledge. His confirmation of Lord Krishna's being the original personality of Godhead is also corroborated by the impersonalist Shankara. All other acharyas have also confirmed the statement, and thus there is no chance of not accepting Lord Sri Krishna as the original personality of Godhead. Bhismadeva says that he is the first Narayana. This is also confirmed by Brahmaji in the Bhagavatam 10.14.14. Krishna is the first Narayana. In the spiritual world, Vaikuntha, there are unlimited numbers of Narayanas who are all the same personality of Godhead and are considered to be the plenary expansion of the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. The first form of Lord Sri Krishna first expands himself in the form of Baladev, and Baladev expands in so many other forms such as Sankarshan, Pradumna, Aniruddha, Vasudeva, Narayana, Purusha, Rama, and Nrsimha. All these expansions are one and the same, Vishnu Tattva, and Sri Krishna is the original source of all the plenary expansions. He is therefore the direct personality of Godhead. He is the creator of the material world, and he is the predominating deity known as Narayana in all the Vaikuntha planets. Therefore, his movements among human beings is another sort of bewilderment. The Lord therefore says in the Bhagavad Gita that foolish persons consider him to be one of the human beings without knowing the intricacies of his movements. Paragraph. The bewilderment regarding Sri Krishna is due to the action of his twofold internal and external energies upon the third one called marginal energy. The living entities are expansions of his marginal energy, and thus they are sometimes bewildered by the internal energy and sometimes by the external energy. By internal energetic bewilderment, Sri Krishna expands himself into unlimited numbers of Narayanas and exchanges or accepts transcendental loving service from the living entities in the transcendental world. And by his external energetic expansions, he incarnates himself in the material world amongst the men, animals, or demigods to reestablish his forgotten relationship with the living entities in different species of life. Great authorities like Bhishma, however, escape his bewilderment by the mercy of the Lord. Esha vai Bhagavan Sakshad Adyo Narayana Puman Mohayan Mayaya Lokam Gudhash Charati Rishnashu. Arjuna makes similar statement in Bhagavad Gita about Krishna. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram, Paramam, Prabhan, etc. These are important verses because there's the Leela of the Lord where one may mistake the Leela to be the actions of an ordinary person. And they are like an ordinary person's behaviors sometimes. There's obviously the transcendental dimension that ordinary persons cannot perform. And behind the Leela is the transcendence of the Lord. Bhismadeva understands. Arjuna understands. Of course, Arjuna understands. He's not one of the 12 Mahajans, but he understands because it's revealed to him by Krishna. It may not be revealed to Arjuna in another moment because of the internal potency acting upon the consciousness of Arjuna such that he just sees Krishna as his friend. because otherwise it'd be pretty awkward. How can you be a friend of one who is the Supreme? So the moods of a devotee towards Krishna may be very fluid, like waves in an ocean are very fluid. And that fluidity has everything to do with what Krishna wants for the pure devotees of the Lord. There are many nice examples where the devotees of the Lord are not understanding the divinity of Krishna. And then at another time, they're understanding the divinity of Krishna. And then at another time, they're not understanding the divinity of Krishna. There are many nice examples, very, very nice example. Mother Jasoda looking inside Krishna's mouth. And she just couldn't accept. I mean, it's just beyond her capacity to even contemplate that this little boy, who is her son, is the source of everything. Or one more Braja Leela, when the cowherd elders had a desire to see the spiritual world after the pastime of Nanda Maharaj being kidnapped by the servants of Varuna. Krishna understood their desire, and he took them to the river Jamuna. They took their sacred bath on a proper day, proper time. And then he immersed them in the lake and lifted them and showed them the spiritual world. And they saw themselves with Krishna in the spiritual world. And they knew it wasn't a hallucination. They knew what it was. And then the Yogamaya curtain closed and they forgot everything. We heard just the other day of Pradyumna being a direct expansion of Krishna in the spiritual world, appearing in, in this world and acting as if he didn't know, or by the influence of the Lord's internal potency, not even recognizing his own divinity and his own power. And that's in Krishna's, not his Braja Leela, but outside of Vrindavan. So it's certainly possible for a living entity to at times have a clear understanding, at other times have a less than clear understanding, and even a covered position by the will of Krishna. There's no escaping being under the will of Krishna. It's our position. And the proper alignment of our position is to try to be in service to the Supreme. And when that being in service to the Supreme, meaning he should be pleased by our existence and what we say and what we do and how we do it and so on, then when there's lapse, then the clouds of ignorance enter and cover. Our consciousness doesn't cover Krishna because Krishna can't be covered by anything, but it covers our consciousness because we're very tiny and we can be forgetful. So this is Bhismadeva reminding Yudhisthira, your feelings for me are natural, Grandfather Bhishma, But, how has this happened and why has this happened? It's the will of the Supreme Lord, the inexplicable will of the Supreme Lord. And here he is, walking amongst us. He's your cousin, but he's not your cousin. He's your cousin, but he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and one should understand that. The position of the Pandavas is very unique, just as mentioned. Sometimes they're understanding, sometimes they're not. Just like one of the glorifications of Krishna is that he has such an intimate relation with the Pandavas that when the marriage ceremony was to take place, Krishna volunteered and took the position of a bard, which is like subservient to a great personality. And he was happy. Was happy doing just as bards will do for a king, sing the glories of a king. That's their occupation. It's their nature. It's their joy. It's what bards do. So Krishna played that function because he enjoys singing the glories of the Pandavas and particularly Yudhisthira in this case. He's very happy. And in different ways. Krishna enjoyed the position of being the servant. So it's the position of bhakti, the science of bhakti, is the fundamental ground of the science of bhakti is we're servants. Sheshatvam, or dasa, or servant. And when the mood of service is there, and the offering of service is there, then one of the Lord's energies is operating, his internal energy. And the internal energy, because he's meant to be enjoyed, is he enjoys. And then, based upon that internal energy, it can be like this, and then it can be like that, and then it can be another thing, because he's enjoying. And he enjoys in the company of his loving devotees. He enjoys in the company of his loving devotees. And as he's enjoying, the living entities also enjoy. There's a happiness that comes from rendering service. And the happiness is the experience of Krishna's happiness. It's a very, very, very simple example. When you're exposed to the sun is hot. And when you're exposed to the sun, you become hot. Say conversely, if there's a very cold winter and cold breeze, or cold air, blast of it, cold air, you feel cold. So the exchange is rasa, and the medium of that exchange is bhakti. That's the regard of the living entity to try to please. But the object is rasa. And rasa includes then, because like the sun makes things hot, or a cold breeze makes things cold, these subjectively feel this, feel that. So the feelings of loving exchange with Krishna has everything to do with how Krishna feels. And of course, Krishna by nature is Ananda. Anandamayo Vyasat. by nature. The absolute truth is Ananda. And there's Anandamaya. And the living entities that contact that Anandamaya, they feel Ananda. Just like by contact with the sun, you feel warm. Or contact with a fire, you feel warm. Bhismadeva is a relisher of Krishna Tattva and Krishna Rasa. He's enjoying Krishna's presence. He's enjoying glorifying Krishna in Krishna's presence. He's enjoying lifting the spirits of Maharaj Yudhisthira. And Maharaj Yudhisthira is enjoying Bhismadeva's company. And he was always like that, because he was their grandfather in the absence of their father. What they understand has come, one can say, it has come from him, or is shared by what has come from him, because he's Mahajan. So the statements of Mahajan are for us ways where we can guide our lives. We can trust the words of Mahajans and guide our lives by their words. And to some degree, by the mercy of Krishna and his dear devotees, to some degree understand the inexplicable purpose of Krishna. Here we are describing, because Bhismadeva is describing what Krishna wanted, although saying it's the Krishna's purpose is inexplicable. He had a certain thing he wanted. He wanted that demoniac kings be eliminated. He wanted that Yudhisthira become the ruler before his departure from this world, not to leave Duryodhana in that position. So many things happened because they were the will of Krishna. And step by step by step, how Jarasandha was killed, and how Duryodhana was killed, and how Drona was killed, and all of, the Krishna is directly involved. One may not see the directly involved. In these cases, Krishna was directly involved. But in all circumstances, Krishna is the overseer and permitter, and so he's involved in that way. Or he brings remembrance to someone, or knowledge to someone, or forgetfulness to another someone. And in this way, the invisible Supreme Personality of Godhead is very involved in worldly matters and transcendental matters, and especially of interest for the devotee are transcendental matters. That's what the Bhagavatam is. And the words of Bhismadeva in this verse, he's illuminating this person over here. See him, Krishna. He's the original Narayan, and he's walking about as if he's one of us. So don't be mistaken. He's your cousin. That's his kindness. He's the original Narayana. Imagine, how can you do anything but imagine what the consciousness of, let's just say, Yudhisthira, hearing from Bhishma, now he's looking at Krishna, and he's the original Narayan. And he's my cousin. And he's walking amongst us. I mean, what do? Take 10 steps back and fall on the ground. But when these revelations are made, how are they processed by these great devotees? How do they function? They, they, they function by the agency of the internal potency. That's how they function. Like Vasudeva and Devaki, when Krishna returned to Mathura after 11 years of being away, and he went to the prison and he freed them, they were struck with awe because they knew how powerful was Kamsa. And here's this 11-year-old boy that just finished him. So they understood he's the personality of Godhead. It doesn't say specifically that they remembered his appearance when he first appeared at midnight in the prison house of Kamsa. It doesn't say they didn't either. They were in awe that this person standing before us, our son, is not our son. He's the personality of Godhead. But Krishna, being reunited with Vasudeva and Devaki, didn't want the awe and veneration mood. He wanted the parental mood. So Krishna covered them with his Yogamaya, and they forgot what they knew. Just like that, poof. Now, being covered by Maya, it's not poof. it's all the time. But Yogamaya, for these personalities, may take this manifestation or some other manifestation. But to experience the parental affection, which is from Krishna, experienced by Vasudeva and Devaki, they were covered by his Yogamaya potency to forget his divinity. And instead, they embraced him and Balaram, which is what they wanted. And they were qualified, they were eligible because they were qualified, and their qualification was they had no other interest than being in service to Krishna as a parent. So they were qualified. So Krishna drew them into that internal potency feature. So the various rasas in transcendence are conducted by the internal potency. And the various tastes, also the word rasa is appropriate, not transcendental, but worldly rasa is there for those who are covered by Maya. So take your pick. Be covered or be covered. Be covered where it's in contact with the Supreme, and contact with the Supreme means Satchitananda Vigraha. Whatever the degree of realization, it's in contact with Satchitananda Vigraha. Or take the other option. No. Then it's the opposite. Day and night. Transcendence or material consciousness. So that Bhagavatam is such a literature. It's awakening transcendental consciousness with various confirmations along the way. So there we go. Hare Krishna. So any discussion?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I'm connecting today's learning from yesterday, right? I notice about myself that when I'm not just alone at home, it's like a continuous struggle to not be covered. It's like a streaming against the river. And the reason if I honestly look into myself, inside that it seems like it's underneath issues of pride, which doesn't let me go. Few things which I felt hurtful, and that's becoming obstacle in my spiritual life.
Everyone.
So it's like every day, I feel instead of studying Srimad Bhagavatam, I have to more observe about me, what I'm doing, how I'm processing. So,
Well, pride is a byproduct of a bodily conception or misconception, we'll say just misconception of self. Bodily conception is common, and mental conception is also there, but identifying with what I am not, false ego. And with false ego, that's the misconception of I, comes the misconception of mine, because pride is in that territory, in the mine territory, supported by and arising from the I conception. It's very easy and natural for me to um, speak on this topic in connection with the Manashiksha seminar I'm preparing for. There's 11 verses. In the very first verse, the preamble, the precondition is that Raghunath Das says is free from pride, comma. And then the next one is with intense, sincere endeavor, and then to get lists, spiritual objects. So there's the subjective and there's the objective, or the subject and object. But a precondition is free from pride, and then there's the qualitative extension, intense, enthusiastic extension towards transcendence. Now, how do you get free from pride? The rest of there's several verses that describe the internal cultivation of what it means to be free from pride, or where the sources of pride come in, and then cutting off those sources or the places where pride comes in. In other words, to cultivate spiritual life, one needs to water the creeper of bhakti, and one needs to pull weeds. So the anartha nivritti process. So however long it takes, just spending a little bit of time on the anartha nivritti topic. Anyone that's done gardening knows it's not just like break the soil with a little instrument, put in some seeds, cover the seeds, water the seeds, and come back later and you have a wonderful garden. Because what happens is within the soil, there's all kinds of other seeds of weeds, and they grow faster. And as you water, they grow faster and they grow faster. So there's an ongoing attentiveness to weed pulling, but the weed pulling isn't the essence. The essence is that seed, that which you wanted to grow, and nurturing that which you wanted to grow. So the positive and the negative. And by doing it consistently, in fact, it may take, commonly, my experiences, takes many seasons. That means many years of cultivation of a garden to the point where the weeds are not abundantly coming because you didn't just chop the tops of the weeds, but you uprooted them. And then the soil is more suited for growing things that you want to grow. And then the watering continues to grow the things you want to grow. So it's a nice metaphor. It's a metaphor that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu uses and Bhaktisiddhanta expands on in relation to the Gundicha Marjana. So you can read that section, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and it's just standard procedure. Some soil has more weeds, some soil has less. And whatever the amount of weeds are, or the seeds of weed-like conditions of heart, that's what it is, and you do the work that you need to do because you're going to be a gardener to garden. So the ongoing is the positive, and that gives strength to continue with the removal of the negative or the unwanted things. Continued watering is needed. That's the ongoing striving in various suitable ways, try to please Krishna within the scope of what's suited for me, etc. And then the weed pulling. So there are primary activities like deity worship, and then the activities that we do anyway, like cooking and cleaning and this thing and that thing, to do those occupational, do our work in such a way we're focused on not the prideful part, but the service part. And it's a cultivation, the mode of service. That's who we are. The more you can act from the platform of who you are, the easier it is to remove the things that you're not. Cultivation. Yes.
Hi Krishna Guru Maharaj, I have a question that's not directly related to this class. Would that be okay? Actually, inspired by your classes on Krishna pastimes, I started reading Krishna book, and I have a question about one of the first chapters where Devaki and Vasudev are imprisoned by Kamsa, and Kamsa decided to kill every child. And I was wondering why Vasudeva and Devaki still decided to have children in the prison, knowing that every child was going to be killed by Kamsa.
Well, we don't know their thought process, but we can understand this much. Their thinking, feeling, willing was inspired by Krishna. And, as the first child was given to Kamsa, as was promised, he gave the child back. Now, that changed because his advisors said, who knows? But a function or service that they desired was to have the Supreme Lord as their son. And so they're moving forward with that intention, and prompted by Super Soul from within, move forward with that intention. You're qualified, I want to become your son. So the micro of how they were processing what they were doing and the consequences of what they were doing, we don't know. They were moved by the internal potency to act as agents or instruments of Krishna's pastime. I mean, the first 6 sons were to be killed by Kamsa. That was already prophesized. So they were instruments for that prophecy. You have something online?
Yes, Maharaj. We got a couple of questions from online.
Okay.
Janamay Jay Prabhu is asking, Hare Krishna Maharaj, when one practices devotional service under the guidance of a spiritual master and he is doing his occupational duties under materialists, is it karma mishra bhakti
No.
or shuddha bhakti?
Well, it's not who you're working under the jurisdiction of, it's your consciousness. So you can't determine what it is without evaluating the consciousness behind the activity. When Jud Bharat was carrying the palanquin of King Rahugana, was he in, mixed devotion? Because he was in the service of a king that was in Maya? Next.
So, Ramapriya Prabhu is asking, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, please give us some guidelines on maintaining our Seshatvam mood when we're going through bodily subtle struggles. Please elaborate with respect to inspiration we can take from Bhismadev's example.
Well, the whole of the Bhagavatam is a description of devotees of the Lord and the Lord and their relationship. And there's so many, 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 many examples of its obstacles, continuing despite obstacles, the Supreme Lord lifting the devotee, carrying the devotee, assisting them through their difficulties. So read Srimad Bhagavatam with the view of receiving what you're looking for, the inspiration to carry on even when there's turbulence. Become a follower of the great devotees of the Lord, because the Bhagavatam is filled with it. Become an adherent, a lover of the Srimad Bhagavatam. You'll be in good shape. That's it? You have something? Would you like to speak into the microphone so the people that remote can hear?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Recently I'm reading Krishna book.
You're reading Krishna book?
Yes.
Okay, good.
One of the chapter, Balram visiting Vrindavan. There gopis were talking to Balram. Balram couldn't hear all their anguish and started reciprocating to gopis. And Balram actually, and it came to Balram was next to Yamuna and taking bath in Yamuna and enjoying with gopis. I read. So I started thinking like, is it different bhakti of gopis that Balram?
Yes, a different set of gopis, exactly. The ones who he was pacifying initially were Krishna's gopis. The ones who he was engaged in rasa dance with, etc., was a different set of gopis. Our acharyas are very, very clear about this. Next? Anything? That's it. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.